Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. And if you're watching virtually, thank you for tuning in. I am so excited to host this first East Brunswick Local Author Day. My name is Stephanie SENDAULA, and I'll be your moderator today. And I'm so thrilled for this first panel of authors. They all know how excited I am. So first, to my direct left, we have Geeta Gwalani. We have Carol Selick. And then we have Diane Unim, also known as Princess Diane von Brainus Bride, which I can completely relate to. So to start off, for each of you, were you a young writer, a late bloomer, or something in between? Yeah, Geeta, do you want to get started?
I think I have been something in between. I started writing as a human resources professional. I would mostly write human resource articles. But that my love for food and passion for cooking would manifest itself into my book, Aromas of Sindh, I think is very, very special and close to my heart.
Oh, thank you. That was lovely. Carol?
I started off being a songwriter and a singer, and then in my late 20s, I decided I had to write about my experiences in the wild late 60s and early 70s, and it became an off and on project up until now. But I'm very happy that I was able to complete Beyond the Song.
I know Carol, and I read her book. It's fantastic. I'm Diane Unim and Princess Diane von Brainus Bride. I actually, I'm a hybrid. I've been writing my entire life, my entire writing life, poems. I have file cabinets of life observances. I call myself an ambassador, a royal ambassador of positivity in the world, but only and I'm an attorney turned certified life coach. But so it's only in my 40s that I really started writing screenplays and musicals, and I realized what my true calling is.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I think each of you would touch on this a little bit, but what life experiences have shaped your writing the most?
I think for me it has been the history behind the Sindhi community, and I think some backstory is important here. This was a community that had to seek refuge into India during the partition that happened in 1947. And though I may not have lived it myself, I think the stories that I would hear from my parents, that is something that truly kind of shaped what I would write and also how I would actually, illustrate it. And the book, therefore, is a collection of 100 recipes, most of them that I have inherited from my mom. And in a way, I've tried to put all of these together for the Sindhi community and also leave a legacy.
Well, I wanted to write about coming of age in the late 60s and 70s, and even though it was a very unique time, the experiences that I had with my friends was also very unique. And I also wanted to give the reader an idea of what it was like to try to make it in the music business during that time period as a young woman.
So I've been writing, as I said, screenplays and musicals, and the first epiphany that I had about becoming a writer was actually in a garden of a friend of mine in Israel. And I knew I wasn't actualizing what I was here for. It kind of, if any of you know the expression tikkun olam, which in Hebrew is heal the world. And I realized I hadn't been following that, so I prayed, what should I do, what should I do? And I found myself in front of a mosaic of Jerusalem in my friend's garden. She was, again, a mosaic artist. And I heard that deep, that still voice you hear inside. I actually didn't hear voices, but it said, combine your art and your humor and do something for the Jewish people. And from there was born my first screenplay, Pyramid Scheme, which was a comedy about the Arabs and the Jews and how to get them together, again, through comedy. But the funny thing was I prayed to find, should I do a screenplay or a book? I didn't hear the answer for that. So I decided on my own I would do a screenplay. But then as life would have it, you have twists and turns, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And often things that look traumatic have positive outcomes, and for me that ended up being a gift in so many ways, which again you can learn about that in the book Bonjour Breast Cancer. I'm still smiling, wit, wisdom, and optimism for beating the breast cancer blues. But that was the impetus for writing a book, because as I went along, I wasn't going to write anything about that because I wanted to just, as Miss Positivity, I wanted to put that all behind me. But then I realized that I was learning so much to help other people that I was writing it down so that I wouldn't forget for myself as I faced each wave of trauma. And it ended up, I realized I had a book there. So that's how that happened.
Oh, thanks, Diane. That was lovely. And I think for many of us who live with chronic illness, we can all relate to that, writing it down before you forget. So I appreciate that answer as well. So, and Geeta, can I ask a follow-up question of you? Because I know you mentioned your mom's recipes. Do you have a favorite? I know it's a little off the cuff, but I'm so curious.
Yes, I do. I do have a favorite, and it's a very popular recipe as well. It is called dal pakwan.
Oh, okay. Wait, can you describe what's in it? Because I'm going to get a copy of your book also. But I'm looking forward to making it.
Great. So essentially, it is a combination of lentils and then served with savory and crisp bread. And it's special because at least as kids, we would have it on very special occasions, also sometimes Sunday brunches. And I think these little experiences, these memories, I think finally that's what life is about. And that's what I think cuisine is about, right? It is about getting people together.
No.
I bought a copy of her book too here, and I can't wait to make that recipe.
Thank you.
I'm so excited. Thank you. That's a beautiful answer too. That is what life is about. It's just those little memories. So thank you for that. So I appreciate you just going on that little tangent with me as well. Okay. My next question for each of you, which I think you also briefly touched on earlier, is what do you think makes a good story?
I think somewhere we've answered it, but I think unless you have a personal experience, you cannot really relate it, nor does it resonate with you. I think personal experiences is what makes a great story. And though mine is a cookbook, even then, each recipe has a story. And that story is what I experienced as a child with my parents and my siblings. And none of the recipe, and I think no cuisine is complete, without the surrounding stories, without the surrounding experiences, the memories, the aromas, and the nostalgia. So I think it's critical that, that experience is extremely personal.
First, I'd like to say that I also read Diane's book, and it was very inspiring. But I think what makes a great story is that the character has to deal with certain conflicts and different life situations, and at the end of the story, they should be changed in some meaningful way. I also think character development and a feeling of honesty that, yes, the author is coming from a sincere place.
I 100% agree with that for both other authors. And I would add to that, if you can create a sense of tension and release, that's really good. But basically, I think in terms of the authenticity and having an odyssey, having a journey, that arc that we all talk about. Although one of my characters in my screenplay talks about, why do we all have to have an arc? Does everybody have an arc? But that is something. The authenticity, I think, is a big deal. You can really, if you can relate from a place that you know. I'm sure you don't always have to do that, but for me, at least, I think feeling it and knowing it, the authentic aspect.
And And I like how all of your writing is just really authentic to your personal selves. And I think that kind of ties into my next question is, which part of your book or books were the most difficult to write and why? Geeta, I'm especially curious for you, because I know this is such a personal cookbook as well.
Yes, it is. I think a couple of things that were, I would say, difficult or challenging. One is to get the perfect picture. I think, especially in a cookbook, I think what appeals to the reader is how the picture looks or how the recipe looks. And I think there were many of the recipes that I had to remake just to get the right picture. But I think even more important was the story alongside. And I had to rely a lot on my memory. And I think putting that down in words such that the reader is able to feel the same, I think that was difficult because I was talking about a very personal experience, and I was also hoping that the reader would feel or at least imagine that. So I would say these two would be the challenges.
I would say that I had two main challenges. I did work with an editor in Princeton, and I would write a scene, and she would say to me, but it needs to be bigger, it needs to be longer. And one in particular was when I was standing in line to audition for Jesus Christ Superstar in New York City, and there were some construction workers across the street, and they were heckling us because we were hippies. And I must have written that scene about 5 times because I needed to work on expanding it. And the second thing that I found the most difficult was when I wrote about my exploits during the sexual revolution. I kept thinking, well, what if so-and-so reads this? Or even worse, what if my husband reads this? But I had to tell myself, no, I have to write it no matter what.
I was thinking the same thing when I read her book, too. Whoa! So for me, mine was more structural, I think. When I was writing the book, Bonjour Breast Cancer, for me, it was the organizational aspect that was the most difficult, because I could, obviously when you have breast cancer, it's a trajectory, a timeline, and a journey. So that already can take care of itself in terms of the timeline that you write it. But the real reason I wrote the book was for strategies, for positivity and optimism, and not sinking when trauma hits you. And what was interesting is many of the strategies could really fit in so many areas. So I didn't want to be duplicative. So it was really trying to figure out how to organize everything so that it went smoothly and I wasn't repeating myself. And another interesting thing, and I'll give you a little writing tip, was because Princess Diane von Brain is fried. If I were writing and if I put the book down for too long, I might forget, where was I or what did I even write? So a really good tip is, if you're writing something and you put it down, make a note of what you want the next issue or aspect of your book to be. Just make a note. Okay, I stopped here and I want to deal with X or Y next. And it'll really help you to pick up where you left off.
I like that tip, Diane. I can use that for myself as well, too. I kind of have a follow-up question based on what Carol said, but I think it would apply for each of you. Carol, you mentioned you're worried about what your husband might think. So how did your family respond to your books? And I'm kind of curious for all of you. I know you all have written really deeply personal books, too.
I think it was a very encouraging feeling that came from my family. One is also, my family had to actually try out what I made.
No pressure.
No pressure, but they had to. And I think it was very, very, family was very supportive. And, while at work, also writing a book, I think it's difficult. and you need that support all around you. So it was very encouraging and also very honest. I think, when you're writing a cookbook, and I think any kind of book, you need some honest feedback, honest opinions, and I think that came in abundance from my family. Extremely supportive, extremely encouraging.
Well, my family's been very encouraging, except for my sister, who I didn't, in my book, I say I don't have a sister. She said she was okay with that, but for some reason, she only read the first chapter, and that was a little disappointing. But the rest of my friends and family, especially my friends from my book club, which one of them is here now, have been unbelievably supportive, and I really, really appreciate it.
Again, my family also very supportive. When I was first diagnosed, one of the scariest things is, well, of course, you don't know if you're going to be around to see your grandchildren or whatever. That was really scary. But the biggest thing for me was how am I going to break it to my kids, because you don't want them to be in fear. And so the thing is, one of the things I learned, and what was really good, is I used a lot of humor in the book, and they responded really well. And my prognosis is very good. It's just in the beginning, you really don't know. And so I was happy to see that the humor really helped them. And one of the biggest gifts, and I would like to also portray to you something the idea that you can show your children or friends and family that when trauma hits, there are other ways to handle it besides just folding. You can find the gifts, you can find positivity. It's always there, but you have to look for it, and you have to set your stars to that. So I was grateful that I think resonated with them, that they felt, hey, she's okay with this. She's okay. Then, as a matter of fact, my husband said, you know what? You're okay if you say you're okay, and I'm okay if I say I'm okay, and it's kind of like that. So I was very happy about that aspect.
Yeah, thank you. That's such a beautiful answer, too. So I appreciate all your vulnerability also. So I think my next question, especially for Carol, but I'm curious for each of you, was there a playlist that you listened to while you were writing, or any music that informed your writing? So I'm so curious for each of your answers.
Honestly, I did not have a playlist, but there are certain things or certain memories that catapult you into writing books, cookbooks, and so on. And I think for me, those were memories, right? I mean, you're writing a cookbook which has which is very close to your heart, which is very close to what you've experienced, especially with parents and siblings. And while I didn't have a playlist, I did have so many memories that I wanted to document in a way and leave a legacy. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, no, that was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, each chapter of my book begins with lyrics from my own original songs. And I do have about 2 or 3 chapters dedicated to a famous songwriter that I worked with named Rosemary McCoy. And she wrote for Elvis Presley, Nat King Cole, Tina Turner. And I was extremely fortunate to work with her. And it seemed like when I was writing the book, I would go into my car and turn on like BGO, and all of a sudden her songs it was almost like she was with me. But I also have a program that I put on at the Long Branch Library for Women's History Month last March, where I sing songs from Joni Mitchell, Carole King, Laura Nyro, and those were the singer-songwriters of this time period that had great influence on me, because we were all experiencing the freedom of the time of being a woman and being a pioneer, actually, during this time period. So for me, what's happening now, today, I feel like we're going back 50 years in time, back to a very repressive time, and I feel very fortunate that I lived in a very liberating time.
I didn't have a musical soundtrack, but I had a leitmotif. And the leitmotif was positivity, really. And the leitmotif is also, in everything I write, I think, is that one person can make a difference. All of us can make a difference. We all have something inside of us that's unique. So I was listening to that leitmotif, what's mine, and I know all of you have yours.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I have one more question for each of you before I open up to audience questions. As I was listening to each of you talk just now, this is just such a personal journey for you. So what did you learn about yourself, if anything, while you were writing your books, or anything that you took away from yourself, like that changed yourself, or anything like that made you grow? So I'm just really curious about that as well.
Yes, I think it did. I think there were just so many experiences that happened while writing the book. And yes, all those experiences change you in some way or the other. For me, first of all, that my love for writing would manifest itself in a cookbook was in itself very, very unique. And then to focus on something which is very specific, which is the Sindhi cuisine, and the backdrop and the history of it, I think it made me research a little more about what the Sindhi community went through during that time. So in a way, it enriched my own understanding of this community. In addition, I also had to research a little more about each of the recipes that I was writing. So yes, while a lot of them were what I inherited from my mom, but cooking evolves, cuisine evolves, and I had to do a lot of research. So I think it made me a lot more experienced in the cuisine itself, a lot more understanding of the history, and helped me document the recipe in a far better way, such that the readers will also be able to reflect and, kind of the experiences would resonate with them. So I think it was deeply enriching and deeply fulfilling.
Yeah, thank you. That was such a lovely answer, too.
For me, it was a very cathartic experience, and it helped me make sense of my life. It was my older self looking at my younger self, not being my younger self, but looking at my younger self from where I am now. And it was an amazing sense of accomplishment when someone says to you, you're an author. That is a big deal. And it was probably the hardest creative project I've ever worked on. It took the longest, and I have a deeper appreciation for authors and books in general.
I think that one of the things I really learned was the depth of my own resilience. And that, the trial by fire kind of thing. And I'm not alone in that. And again, like I say, that we all have a lot of resilience that we don't even know we have until these things happen. And what I also learned was the resilience so much comes from your mind. You have resilience, things may be happening physically to you, but oh my gosh, we find these resources in our minds and our outlook and how we frame things. For example, I have letrozole, which is an estrogen blocker. And I was worried that I would wake up one day with a mustache or whatever. So, and it was frightening for me to take these pills. So what I decided to do was every time I have a new prescription bottle, I write on them my youth and my beauty pills. And when I take them at night, I'm thinking, hey, I'm taking my youth and my beauty pills. I mean, there's so much that you can do. You can find it inside of you, but you really have to want to do that. So, and the other thing that I learned about optimism is that there's so optimism doesn't have to be Pollyanna. That's a real old school reference, but the idea is, oh, everything's definitely going to be lovely and everything will work out. And I'm a very optimistic person, but I said to myself, okay, Miss Princess of Positivity, how are you going to be smiling now? And I realized that the optimism is not necessarily like outcome optimism. Maybe there won't be a great, outcome at some point. And, someday the train is stopping. Someday the party's over. Sorry, it just is. We don't know when. But there's another kind of optimism, and the optimism is whatever comes my way, I'm going to be able to handle it. That is huge. It's huge. And so I've learned not outcome optimism, but outlook optimism. And that made me stronger. Because my fear was, well, what if I just have outcome optimism, and what if there's not a good outcome? Then I really can't be optimistic, can I? But yes, I can, because I have resilience that comes from the optimism that I will handle whatever comes my way. And that's really, but you have to understand that, and everybody, again, can have that too.
Yeah, thank you. That was incredibly moving, Diane. I appreciate that answer. So I wanted to open up for audience questions. If anyone has any, we have a few minutes, and you're welcome to ask the authors any questions about books, writing process. So feel free to go ahead. So no pressure. Or if any of the other authors here have some questions for these authors, that'd be great too. But also no pressure. Oh, wait, Angus, do you have a question? Oh, okay. Sure, go ahead.
I have a question for Her Royal Highness. Her Royal Highness Diane. I know that you especially based on the name Brain is Fried, and I know that my brain gets more and more fried as I get older. How did the effect of your memory, I know, which is to be affected by chemo brain?
Yes.
How did that affect your ability to write?
That is a good question. The question was, how did having chemo, and there is something called chemo brain, or allegedly chemo brain. It's a great excuse. How did that affect my writing? Well, I'm still using the excuse of chemo brain. I found out about it too because I was at a party, and I was talking to a doctor there who's on long-term chemo for something really tough to deal with. And I said to him, I don't get it. I'm really having trouble with my memory. I'm forgetting so much. And he said, oh, you probably have chemo brain. I said, what? I had never heard of it. He said, yeah, chemo brain. So, the thing is, the writing process is very it just rolls when you're plugging into, and I know you've written a lot of books, so you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. When you're plugging into something that's really authentic, it just kind of rolls out of you from someplace else. It's almost like you're the instrument, so the chemo brain didn't affect me that way because I could roll with it. But interestingly, like the tip that I was telling you, I would definitely, where I would leave off, I'd have to make notes to myself so that I could find where I could know where I wanted to pick up. And that could just be how I am, or it could have been exacerbated by chemo brain. But the thing is, everything that you do, you still have to turn it and say, okay, it is what it is, and kind of look the other way. If I was feeling physical ramifications from some of the medication, I'd just kind of say, okay, just go anyway. Just like tuck it under your arm and go. And so many of the things I found is just to try to look at things, reframe them in a different way. So maybe I would try not to focus on my chemo brain and just focus on doing something that's really on purpose.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great answer, too. Yeah, does anyone else have any questions? Oh, yes, go ahead.
I have a question for Carol. How do you compare songwriting to writing your autobiographical fiction? Can you repeat the question too, so we can?
How do I compare songwriting to writing my novel? I think songwriting is easier. Not that songwriting is easy, but it is shorter, and you get to rhyme, which I love doing. But you do have the constriction, of course, of putting it to a melody. But it doesn't take the long-term commitment that I found writing a book does. But thank you for asking.
That was a great question. I was actually curious about that, too, so thank you for asking. So, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, something I'm really curious about, and I can only ask Geeta, because for everybody here, is I really like to eat. Cooking not so much, but when I do try to, to make a recipe, or if I'm trying to alter a recipe of my own. In fact, the most recent one was an Indian dish. And I have, it's sort of like being tone deaf. If somebody is tone deaf to music, I'm like tone deaf to flavors. It's like I know what I like, but is it the ability to say it's missing this or it needs more of that, other than salt? I can't pick out what's missing. And I can taste something and recognize a flavor, but not cooking. Is that something that's like an innate thing for people? That's those who make good chefs? Or is that something you can really learn by just loving and doing it a lot? Can you summarize that?
Okay, I'll summarize that question. And the question is the understanding of flavors in it, or does it happen because you love to cook? Am I translating your question correctly?
Yeah, so is the ability to determine flavors and what's needed something innate, do you think, or is it completely learned?
Or is it organic? Yeah. In my experience, I think it is something that develops over time. For example, it is likely that if I'm eating something, I may not know all the spices or flavors that are there in that dish. But I think for me, I make a conscious attempt, and I'm very aware of what I am eating, and I think that kind of helps. A lot of the cooking process, the understanding of cuisine, I think is very, very organic. It happens over time. May not be in it. I didn't have it. Honestly, it happened to me after my son was born. So I think motherhood kind of, had that happen for me. And it was the need to see that, my son is getting the best of flavors and the best of cuisines. That kind of got me more and more conscious and aware of what I was using and how I was, cooking it. So I think it's organic. In my case, not necessarily inherent or in it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, does anyone else? We have time for one last question, if anyone has any more questions. I may have a follow-up question for you, Geeta, and we can do that as a last question. So for those curious about your books, I am going to get a copy too. Which recipe should we start with? I know you have your favorite, but should we start there, or is there one that you recommend we all start with?
Okay. The recipe has the book has 100 recipes, and they're at various, degrees of difficulty. I will urge you to pick up any of the lentil dishes. They're very easy to make and extremely flavorful, and aside of that, very healthy. So that's what I'd pick.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's great. I love lentils, so I'm looking forward to it. And thank you, everyone. So we have a brief break, and in a few minutes, we'll have our next panel. So thank you again both for being here, Geeta, Carol, Diane. It was so lovely to have you all.